Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Hamad Safi, and I have a presentation on my individual project, which is an historical documentary about Westminster Kingsway College.
Cool.
My project is about the Soho campus specifically, and just like what facilities were used in back in 1800s, the courses offered now.
Yeah.
And just about building on what the school used to be, just a public school. Shall we next slide? Yeah. I'm kind of struggling.
Sorry, just look at the thing. What's it saying? What was the process of making this?
So, process I had to interview teachers. I interviewed Eric Billsy.
Excellent.
Everything. There's some research on the internet about the college campus. It's like taking pictures of the building and area
Cool.
and editing.
Good.
I did use a Blackmagic 4K camera, but I'm not sure which one.
Okay. Cool.
And yeah. That's about
Good.
it.
Yep.
So it's like so that was so the first thing was like software that was used for the editing, which was Final Cut and Canva, and the picture outside school, which is going to be in the documentary, and on the side is the actual project. That's a flash I play.
What's next?
It's a video here, but it's not public.
Okay. So you want to show the film? Yeah. What does it say at the top there?
I just used to browse or actually go back to the project.
Sorry.
It's not working.
Is it up on YouTube? Yeah. Do you want to go to YouTube? You can get it from YouTube. Let's go full screen, shall we? Cool.
My name's Eric. I've been working at the college for 22 years. I've been at the Soho site since 2004. And when I came here, it was quite different. Soho was quite different to what it is now, even though that's not that long ago, 2004. I would say that it's much tidier, it's a much nicer place than it was in 2004. I mean, there were a lot more strip clubs in 2004. There were a lot more strange shops, where guys would stand outside, women would stand outside and get people to come in and pay. They weren't allowed to sell alcohol, but they would get these people in and then basically bully them into paying enormous amounts of money for a glass of orange juice or something. A project which started in 1870 or around about 1870, and the idea was the government at the time thought that if they educated children, then they would be better adults. So, because at that time, there was no free education. Education was only for rich people. But the government at the time basically said we need to educate, everybody needs to be educated by law. You have to go to school as a child. I'm not sure up to what age, 14 I think, it might have been younger, but you definitely have to go from the age of 6, I think it was. You have to go to school, but there were no schools. So they basically built, in between 1870 and 1900, I think they built something like 300 schools in London. And this was one of them. This was one of the first ones. So it was boys and girls. The boys were separated from the girls. They weren't allowed to play together. So the girls had a playground on the roof, and the boys had a playground underneath the school. So the school, all of what is now the main space here, and the Mac room and the PC room, I think, I'm not sure, but most of that was open. So there wasn't any of the glass bit outside. You would just be playing in this playground in the ground, on the ground, and there'll be toilets out the back, which have now been demolished. Classes apparently were up to 100 children, and there were so many books. Because they didn't have many books, they had to share the books. So there was a lift, a hand-operated lift, so they could move the books from one floor to the next floor for the next lesson, or because they had to share the books. Before 01 was made, so all of it was out. Most of this downstairs was outside. This is one of the few rooms that was a room. Even back in Victorian times, it was a room. It has a fireplace there, I think. So this room would have been a room in the Second World War. The playground would have been open, so they must have put the bodies here, or in the corner room, the PC room as well was a room. So one of those two, maybe both, I don't know. Yeah, apparently that's what they did. So 01 started in 2004. It was funded by the European Social Fund, I think, and the London Development Agency. They put money in. The college put money in. And the idea was that we would be a kind of a bridge between education and the post-production industry in Soho. So people would come from here, and then they would go on to be apprentices, or they would just work for the post-production houses. So the funding lasted for 3 years. But what happened at the end of the 3 years? The post-production houses were supposed to then fund the training, but they didn't. They just all disappeared, so there was no funding. So we started to try and do full cost courses here, and then I also came up with the idea of renting out the studio to commercial companies. So we had, BBC, Channel 4, Sky Movies did some stuff here.
Very interesting history there. I don't know if you knew much of that information before you started. I didn't. The bodies, though. What was this about the bodies? Where did that suddenly come from? Tell us more about that, Hamad.
I think Sir Eric told me that was back in the World War II days. I can't remember.
But suddenly there were bodies. Were these people who were killed in the war or something?
I think so.
That's what he said.
Is that what he said? Yeah.
Dead bodies were kept in there. He even said there was a ghost living here, there was a ghost here.
Cool.
Which he met before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's think a little bit about. So tell us a little bit about the production process then. So you obviously conducted an interview with Eric. Is that correct? How did you go about doing that?
So yeah, I just asked him, and he kind of just like helped out with the interview because I wasn't really sure.
And okay, yeah. And did you think about which questions to ask him?
I did sort of.
Good.
But while I was interviewing him, I just really wasn't sure about what questions to ask.
Okay, so did you do any research then about, what kind of research did you do about the centre?
It's just about one of the research I did by the centre, that it was apparently a Jewish community.
And how did you find that information?
Google.
So you did do some research then.
Yeah, I was kind of struggling.
Okay, so what kind of area was Soho back in the 18? It was a beautiful little area of London.
I was really struggling,
Well-
critical.
What did people say about Soho in those days? Did anybody make any comments about it? Whether it was nice or not?
Well, according to Eric, he told me it was like a rough area back then.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody? Yeah, Chanel.
I have a question. So, what was your inspiration behind it?
Okay, well, I never really had any inspiration behind it. I mean, like I did got help and ideas from Sir David and everyone, just to get out of my comfort zone and do something else, because I was gonna make something related with depression, but I was like making the same thing over and over again. So I was like, I tried documentary, which would be my first and last time, I guess.
I think this is potentially a very interesting documentary. Anybody else got any questions? Yes, Titi.
What was the hardest thing you encountered while recording Queen's project?
It's like thinking critically on how to, like, the questions, research, and how to edit it. Because I struggle with editing things. I'm not like a field of interest or something I can't edit.
You're technically quite a good editor, though. I think, are you not?
Yeah, but that really depends on the field. So if I had to create like a video game montage, I can edit that.
Yeah.
I can be okay. But if I had to do a documentary or something professional,
Yeah.
that will be a struggle.
Okay. Okay. So, sorry. Yes, Chelsea.
What kind of, since this is like a new territory for you, what kind of new editing techniques or features did you discover while making this?
Oh, I never really discovered any new editing techniques really. It was just like I just want to figure out what should I put first and what I shouldn't put, because I know how to use the tools and software. I just really didn't know how to structure it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think this is a problem for all editors, isn't it? It's, you know how to cut from one scene to another, don't you? Yeah, and you know how to assemble. It's just knowing how do you give meaning to your edit by putting things in the right order. Is that what you mean? To structure it properly. Yeah. So what do you think about the currents when you watch it now? What do you think about what you see now in terms of the structure? How do you feel about it?
I'm not really sure. I do know there's a bit more I could have left or I could delete, but even after getting help, when I was just finishing it off at home, it's like I just got kind of confused. I really didn't know how to put it together.
Could you see now there are things that you could add? What else could you add now that might give it more interest?
I have to watch the whole thing again to see.
Do you? Well, you've just seen it.
Well, the actual document, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one interesting thing I could have left. I think I cut it out. It was about a ghost being in the building.
I mean, if you had more time, Hamad, if you had another week, what extra footage would you go and shoot to put into it?
If I had more time, I was thinking of doing something else, like a one-take shot with Sir Eric, like recording him going through the entire campus.
That'd be interesting.
Because that probably would have also been a bit easier than just recording him, trying to figure out what to put in the video.
Anyone else got any questions? Yes, Titi.
I have just one more. If you have any, what's the best part of this process, creating all these edits and things like that? What would you say the best thing is that you've done?
About this project? I really don't know. It's a hard question.
what about, there were various points when Eric talked about certain things, he mentioned certain things, and I was thinking, ooh, it would have been quite nice to have a bit of footage of that in there. Did you think about any of those things? Might be bits of footage missing, maybe it would be nice to insert. Maybe you didn't have a chance to shoot yet?
I think they were nice. I think there were other things, but I just really struggled. Oh yeah, I had one thing, which was the third floor, the roof, which I think that was used for the girls' toilet.
And the playground?
Yeah, and that was used as a playground as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And am I right in thinking, you know more about this than I do, am I right in thinking there was something to do with the ghosts somewhere?
So yeah, so there used to be a ghost on the corridor, so Eric said, like in the studio room as well, there used to be a ghost around the campus.
Right, and what did that make? Did you think there was anything you could have used there to help illustrate that in your video? Was there any footage you could have used?
Yes, I was going to use a footage of that Robin, that was part of the sounding Charles when he did it, who's there. That was kind of scrapped out.
Okay, but you could have used that, I suppose, couldn't you? You know, if you'd wanted to. Yeah, cool. Are there any other questions at all? No? Well, well done. That's very clear. Thank you very much indeed.